what happens to you in your 10th mile? When you reach that moment that you're going through something to where everything just feels as if it's about to go out of control, stop for a second. Assess what's going on. Are you really in pain? Are you really out of breath? Are things really out of your control? Or is it just a moment for you to say, okay, let me take the moment to get things under control? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And let me work with that. All right, everybody worldwide, you're now tuned into Motivation and Confidence, where we help you do your daily best. And I'm your host, Tom Danger. The 10th mile. And we're calling this one the 10th mile because I ran a half marathon, 13.1 miles. And I just want to describe the process of how I got there and how I got through it, and how you can apply the thought process of completing a marathon to tough moments that you may have in life. Okay? And before we go any further, please like, subscribe, and share. If you have an idea or a comment that you would like to send over, send it to tommydanger@gmail.com, tommydanger@gmail.com. Or you can also leave it in the comments or follow us on social media. You can just hit me up on my Twitter handle, Tom Danger, Facebook, Tom Dange, Instagram, Tom Danger. And this week's episode is sponsored by Simply. You see how luxurious and dark the hairs of my beard are? All natural product, very simple process. Simply, check it out. It's really good. Have nothing but good things to say about it. But for all the fellas that want to, just even out the color in your beard, if you don't want to have the salt and pepper going on and you want to have a more defined and even color look, it gives you a nice rich color, real simple to use, definitely, no pun intended. Simply, link will be in the comments, and you will also get a discount if you use the discount code, which was for Tom Danger. Now back to business. So several years ago, I want to say almost 10 years ago, I wanted to figure out a way to help deal with stress. I was in this particular job and it was extremely stressful. And at one point in my career, I had the luxury of taking a lunch break every day. Once I started this new career, shame on me, the lunch hour was now dedicated to completing work because somehow a meeting would always be scheduled around the lunch hour. So now I'm at my desk trying to eat something within 15 minutes. So I thought a good technique for me to do is every morning get up and go for a walk. So I originally started to go for a walk, just a short walk in my neighborhood to a local park. And it's probably about, I want to say in diameter, it's probably about a half a mile. And I would walk around this park when I started, once, come back to my house. Then I go out another day and did it twice, 3 times, 4 times. And over time, I would see like a group of old women out there, and they would just be walking. And so we would give each other like the head nod because I'd be walking in the opposite direction of them. So I know if I'm doing my good laps when I keep passing them. And so after a while, I started to run. I seen some other people around the park and they were just doing like a light jog. So I said to myself, I can do that. So I would walk 3 times, and then the fourth lap, I would run. And it was so funny because when I started doing it, there was this guy in my neighborhood that was into whatever recreational drug that he used. He looked at me, he's like, "What's wrong with you, man? You high? Why you keep walking around the park like that? What's wrong with you?" He didn't realize that I was exercising. He thought I was just bugging out walking around the park, but that wasn't the case, right? And I did this for at least a year. And I worked it up to the point to where I would no longer walk the 3 laps around the park. I would basically run the 3 laps around the park. And running in circles, for those of you who run, sometimes it doesn't feel good to see the same place time and time again. So then I switched it up, and I went from like Marcus Garvey Park, which is close to me, and then I wound up going to Central Park, and I would run around the lake. I think people call the lake something else there. They call it the Mere. That's the official terminology. So I would run from my house down around the Mere, which was a longer distance, and the same thing. So, I would run and do 1 lap back to my house, and then I ran again. I would do 2 laps around the Mere, then back to my house. And after a while, it definitely helped it work because I would be so like exerted that I didn't, or not exerted, I would be so relaxed that the little things that seemed as if they were a big deal didn't really matter anymore. And naturally, because I wanted to be a more, not naturally, but because I wanted to be a more efficient runner, I started changing my diet. So changing my diet, running on a daily basis, so I see the changes in my health. For one, I'm not as stressed. Even though I was diagnosed and I still have high blood pressure, but my blood pressure was under control. So going from medicine twice a day, I have it down to once a day. Combining that with juicing on a daily basis. For those of you who follow me on social media, I have this famous slogan and video that I put up almost every other day. And I'll say something, and at the end of it, I'll go, "Did you juice today?" So for those of you out there who are not juicing, I highly recommend it, but that's another episode altogether. So I started noticing the different changes in me, which were a positive effect. But the distance that I was running was still about 2 to 2.5 miles. So one time at work, one of my coworkers was like, "Oh, there's a 10K coming up. As a team, we should do it." So I was like, "All right, cool." Didn't even calculate like what a 10K was. Now I realize, it's 3.5 miles or 6.5 miles in total distance. And just out of routine, I wanted to push myself further, so I would find little different routes in Central Park to go longer. And here's when the change began to happen. So once I stopped running around the Mere, I went off on a path to where the bikes are. And where the bikes are, you can do the entire Central Park, which is about 6 miles exactly. And I remember running away from the Mere, going on a path where the bikes are, heading downtown toward 59th Street. And as I'm running, when I reached, it was like just past the reservoir, because in my mind, I was already conditioned to do 2.5 miles. So in my mind, I had already plateaued. And I remember once I went past that 2.5 mile mark, I said to myself, "Oh shit, what am I doing?" And I started to slightly freak out because all I could see was greenery everywhere. It wasn't that many people. It wasn't like where I could just turn around and walk back home. Like, I'm deep in the park now. And I bring that up to segue into the marathon. So we talk about the progress or the steps that were made in order for me to lead up to running the 10K. And the 10K again started from walking, short distance, then you increase the longer distance. But here's the point. Once you reach that oh shit point in your mind, it's basically you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. In your mind, you have already determined, yes, this is what I can do. This is all that I can do. But what is that little point inside of you, or what was that little point inside of me that said, keep going? Because that's where a lot of us trip ourselves up at. We reach that point to where it starts to feel uncomfortable in the sense of we don't really have a real reason to give up other than the unknown. And it is the fear of the unknown that is breaking us down. Now, me running past the reservoir, my legs weren't hurting. I wasn't out of breath or anything. So I kept a steady pace and I wind up completing the park. Cool. All right. So now I've plateaued in my mind that I can complete Central Park, and for me to complete a 10K is not really a problem. However, when I ran the 10K, there's a condition called heat. In the day of the actual race, it was probably close to 100 degrees. Now, I ran before 6 miles in good weather, but without the heat. So now the heat is beating me up. I'm starting to lose my breath. You know, the air is a lot thinner when it is heat. So now I need to get something to drink. But I never gave up. I just kept pushing. So now we fast forward to the marathon. I keep saying marathon. That's in my future. Marathon's in the future. Half marathon is what was recently completed in Central Park back on February 26th. So leading up to the marathon, I set in this app that I use called Strava. And if you guys are on Strava, you can follow me. I'm Tom Danger, and I'll follow you back. And we could, salute each other for committing to our levels of fitness and health on the app. So I basically had a 12-week training plan that I wanted to do, which was every other day, about 3.5 miles, 3 days a week. And on the 4th day, I would do a long run. So 3 short runs and then a long run. And during my training, when I originally planned to do it 2 years ago, I wind up fracturing I think it's called my tibia. That's, forgive me if I'm saying the wrong muscle, but one of the biggest not muscles, one of the biggest bones in your leg, I wind up having a hairline fracture there. So all my training originally went out the window. I was to pieces. I was hurt, but I knew that this was something that I wanted to complete one day. And sometimes you have to realize that things will not happen when you want them to happen, but it is your responsibility. It is your desire. It is meant to be for you to do it as long as you push yourself. And you have to push yourself. You have to get used to being uncomfortable. And one way that people would say to me like, Tom, you crazy. So after I would run around Central Park, I would then come back and get in an ice cold shower. Now, neurological reasons, muscle reasons, it's really good to do that. It helps to soothe the muscles and everything else. But I did it for the shock, right? To go from two extremes of something that is extremely hot to extremely cold, and know that in a matter of seconds, I can adapt, right? That's all that we're talking about here. We're talking about the ability to adapt. And how do you do that? It's all in your mind. You have to condition your mind to believe you can achieve anything that you put your mind to. Okay? So even though my leg was broken a year, I had to start walking again, physical therapy, riding bikes, swimming, keeping myself active so that a year later I can go back on the training path, because I'm going to complete this 13.1 miles. During the training, the longest run that I did at one time was 10 miles, right? So I was happy that the race was taking place in Central Park, because I was used to the location, learned the hills, learned how to pace myself. And, we always hear people in life say that, life is not a race, it's a marathon. And that's so true, because when you're running a marathon, for those of you who are elite runners, you have a particular pace and a stride, and you're speeding and you're going, and that's what you want to do. But for the rest of the people, it's about finding your pace and staying steady. That's what life is. Finding your pace, staying steady, and focus on your goal. Okay? So we're going to talk about the 10th mile in a minute. So practicing, I wound up hitting 10 miles. Again, the half marathon is 13.1. I've been running around Central Park. Now, the way that they have this course set up now is that it's 2 full loops around Central Park. And in Central Park, there are 2 really tough hills. One is called the Heartbreak Hill, which is on 1/10. And then there's another hill that's just on, I want to say, closer to the museum. So 60, 70 something street coming back uptown. Those 2 hills are tough. But through training, I understood slow down and stay the course when I reach those hills, and don't exert myself trying to run fast up the hill, because then I knew that going back down the hill, I wouldn't need that much energy. So I would just keep that stride. So you want to keep your stride. So I do the 2 laps. First 2 laps, no problem, right? But then that 10th mile hit. And when that 10th mile hit, I suddenly started to get a sharp pain just below my rib cage on the right-hand side. Now, the weather that day, it was I want to say late, early, or about 48 degrees was the temperature. And with the temperature, it was comfortable. So it wasn't too cold and it wasn't too hot. But my body started to, I don't know, like it just felt like I didn't have enough salt in my body. My throat got extremely dry. Now, along the course, of course, they had water and Gatorade, but my body just, it started to feel as if it was eating on itself. And, hold on a second. And again, I had that moment, and it was like, oh shit, what is going on right now? Why do I feel this way? I need something to eat. Like all these things started going through my mind, like, I'm going to pass out. My legs are getting weak. I'm not going to make it. But I understood and knew that I had to push myself. So I had I had Hershey Kisses inside of my carrying case. I popped out a Hershey Kiss. I started to walk. I probably walked for a quarter of a mile. I let the sugar get into my body, because when you run, your body goes through 3 phases of fuel, carbs, fat, then protein, right? So I was already, once you hit like the 7th mile, like you start cutting into your fats, and then after that you start cutting into your protein. I don't eat that much meat, but I get my protein from vegetables. So I think that my body started doing something a little crazy. But again, in your mind, you have to position it to say, I'm going to do this. Now, there are other people who are still flying past me. They're going. You don't look at those people. Don't concern yourself with the pace of others. Concern yourself with your pace, because it is your pace that is going to finish your race. I kept the pace. My pace was for me. At the moment, my pace was just walking. I walked, got myself together, got to the next drinking station, got a sip of Gatorade, started to stride again, kept going, hit another hill. That hill was tough, that hill on 66th Street. Again, in my mind, I got to do it. I got to slow down. And sometimes slowing down is the best thing, because slowing down allows you to assess what's going on. Sometimes when you do things, you just hit autopilot and you just go. And you want to try and complete the task as quickly as possible. But not always do you need to rush through things or work on autopilot, right? You really need to understand what's going on. And once you understand what's going on and you realize that you are in control, you just go back to your pace. Finished that hill, got back to my pace, started to run again. I reached the 12th mile. I started to feel a little dehydrated. Again, my body's like craving salt. Took another sip of Gatorade, walked a few feet, pushed it all the way to the end. Wound up getting the medal. Did it in about 2 hours and 13 minutes, was just about a 10-minute mile. May not have done it as fast as other people, but it was done. The most critical thing to remember here is what happens to you in your 10th mile. When you reach that moment that you're going through something to where everything just feels as if it's about to go out of control, stop for a second. Assess what's going on. Are you really in pain? Are you really out of breath? Are things really out of your control? Or is it just a moment for you to say, okay, let me take the moment to get things under control? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And let me work with that. And as long as you use those tools, you're going to continue to level up with no matter what situation that you go into. You recognize what your strength is, what your weakness is, and what you need to do to get through the situation at hand. That is the 10th mile. That is the marathon. That is the pace in your stride in life to always push past that 10th mile. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you would like any life coaching, I am fully certified as an execution life coach with or through Dr. Eric Thomas. So feel free to email me. Again, this podcast was sponsored by Simply. So if you're looking to have your beard colored evenly and keep it nice and fresh, check the link within the description below. Like, subscribe, and share. And we're on all platforms. If you have a suggestion for the show, please hit us up. You're listening to Motivation and Confidence, where we help you do your daily best. Thank you for tuning into Motivation and Confidence, where we help you do your daily best. Like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Check us out on various platforms: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Overcast, Castbox, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, TuneIn, or Alexa Media.